Chapter 9. The Room of Eyes. The work began at dawn. Dr. Thorne arrived with a van full of equipment that looked like it belonged in a mad scientist's laboratory. Mirrors of every conceivable size and shape, cameras with lenses that seemed to bend light in impossible ways, and sensors that hummed with electronic purpose. But it was the mirrors that dominated everything else, stacked and sorted with obsessive precision. Perceptual predators exist in blind spots, he explained as they began hauling the equipment upstairs. Eliminate the blind spots. Eliminate their hiding places. Simple in theory, nightmarish in practice. Ethan's bedroom had become the focal point of their strategy. It was the space where he felt most vulnerable, where the entity had visited him in dreams, where Lena had stood watching him sleep for those terrible 12 minutes. If they were going to make their stand, it would be here. Every surface needs to be reflective, Doctor. Thorne continued, positioning a large mirror against the wall where their headboard had once stood. Floor, ceiling, walls. We need complete visual coverage with overlapping fields of observation. They worked in shifts, one of them always maintaining visual contact with the other while positioning mirrors and cameras. The predator's presence was strongest during transitions, during moments when attention wavered or focus shifted. By maintaining constant observation of each other, they could prevent it from manifesting while they built their trap. The first few mirrors went up easily enough. But as they added more reflective surfaces, strange things began to happen. Ethan would catch glimpses of movement in the mirrors that didn't correspond to their actual positions in the room. Dr. Thorne's reflection would seem to lag a fraction of a second behind his actual movements. Sometimes, when Ethan looked at his own reflection, he could swear he saw Lena's face looking back, not the Holloway thing that had been hunting him, but his wife as she'd been before everything went wrong, mouthing words he couldn't hear. Ignore the anomalies, Doctor, Thorne advised, not looking up from the complex array of cameras he was positioning in the corner. The predator is trying to distract us, to create gaps in our attention. That's how it fights back. By midday, the bedroom had been transformed into something that hurt to look at directly. Mirrors covered every wall, arranged at angles that created infinite cursement reflections. The ceiling was a patchwork of reflective tiles that turned every movement into a kaleidoscope of repeated images. Even the floor had been covered with sheets of polished metal that threw the reflections back at strange angles. Standing in the center of the room was like being inside a crystal, surrounded by endless versions of themselves stretching away into infinity. Every gesture was multiplied 1,000 times, every expression reflected back from countless angles. Perfect, Doctor, Thorne said, surveying their work. Nothing can hide in here. Every possible line of sight is covered, every potential blind spot eliminated. But even as he spoke, Ethan noticed something disturbing. In one of the mirrors on the far wall, his reflection was smiling when he wasn't. In another, Dr. Thorne's reflection seemed to be looking directly at him while the real Dr. Thorne was examining his equipment. The reflections are wrong, Ethan said quietly. Dr. Thorne looked up sharply. What do you mean? Look at the mirror behind you, your reflection. Dr. Thorne turned to look, and both men froze. In the mirror, Dr. Thorne's reflection was indeed looking directly at Ethan, but its face was subtly wrong, the features slightly rearranged, the expression hungry rather than concerned. It's adapting, Doctor, Thorne murmured, his voice tight with worry. Using the reflections against us, turning our sanctuary into another kind of trap. As they watched, more reflections began to show anomalies. Ethan's reflected self started moving independently, some standing when he sat, others gesturing when his hands were still. The infinite regression of mirrors created a hall of versions, and not all of them were behaving like they should. This is impossible, Ethan said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were meaningless. Everything about the past few months had been impossible. Not impossible, Doctor, Thorne replied, adjusting one of his cameras to focus on the aberrant reflections. Just operating by different rules. The predator is learning to exist in the spaces between reflections, in the gaps between observation and reality. One of Ethan's reflections, the one in the mirror directly opposite him, suddenly stopped moving entirely. While the real Ethan shifted and breathed and blinked, his reflection stood perfectly still, staring back with unblinking eyes that looked increasingly unlike his own. It's not just using the reflections, Ethan realized with growing horror, it's replacing them. Doctor, Thorne's equipment began registering readings that made him curse under his breath. The electromagnetic signatures are off the charts. It's pouring massive amounts of energy into this space, rewriting the basic rules of how reflection works. The still reflection began to smile, not Ethan's smile, but something colder, more predatory. As they watched, it raised one hand and pressed it against the inside surface of the mirror, as if the glass was a window rather than a reflection. "Hello, darling," it said, and the voice was clearly audible despite the barrier of glass and impossibility. "Do you like what I've done with the place?" More reflections began to move independently. Some showed Ethan and Dr. Thorne being stalked by tall shadows. Others revealed versions of the room where the walls bled and the mirror showed scenes of violence. In one particularly disturbing reflection, Ethan could see himself standing over Dr. Thorne's corpse, blood on his hands, and that familiar empty expression on his face. "It's showing us possible futures, Doctor," Thorne said, his voice strained. "Potential outcomes if we fail." "Or promises," the reflection of Ethan added, its smile widening. "I do so enjoy making promises." The real Ethan stepped closer to the mirror, studying the thing that wore his face. "You're not me, aren't I?" The reflection tilted its head with that same mechanical precision he'd seen in Lena. "I'm made from your fears, your guilt, your desperate need to save someone who is already lost. I'm more you than you are." "Where is she? Where's Lena?" The reflection's expression softened into something that might have been genuine sadness. "She's right here. She's been here all along, watching through these eyes, screaming through this mouth." It pressed both hands against the glass now. "Would you like to see her?" The face in the mirror began to change, features shifting and flowing like liquid. For a moment, Ethan saw Lena looking back at him. Not the hollow-eyed thing from his nightmares, but his wife as he remembered her, beautiful and warm and desperately afraid. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the glass. "Help me, it's so cold in here and I can't find my way out." He reached toward the mirror before Dr. Thorne grabbed his wrist. "Don't," the doctor warned. "That's how it feeds, on connection, on the desperate need to reach across impossible barriers." But Ethan couldn't look away from Lena's reflection, from the tears streaming down her face, from the way she pressed her hands against the glass as if she could break through by sheer will. "Please," she begged. "I've been fighting it for so long. I'm so tired of fighting." "I know," Ethan whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I looked away." "It's not your fault," Lena's reflection said, and for a moment her voice was exactly as he remembered it. "But you can fix it. You can let me out." Dr. Thorne's grip on his wrist tightened. "Ethan, listen to me. That's not your wife. It's the predator wearing her face, using your guilt against you." But looking at Lena's reflection, seeing the love and desperation in her eyes, Ethan found it hard to care about the distinction. Real or not, she was suffering. Real or not, she needed him. "How?" he asked. "How do I let you out?" Lena's reflection smiled through her tears. "Touch the glass, just once. Bridge the gap between us." "Ethan, no. Doctor," Thorne warned, but his voice seemed to come from very far away. Ethan's hand moved toward the mirror, drawn by forces stronger than logic or self-preservation. In the reflection, Lena reached out to meet him, their palms almost touching with only the thin barrier of glass between them. The moment before contact, Doctor, Thorne's camera flashed with blinding intensity, flooding the room with harsh white light. In that instant of absolute illumination, all the reflections snapped back to normal. Ethan and Dr. Thorne standing in a room full of mirrors, nothing more and nothing less. "What did you do?" Ethan demanded, spinning to face the doctor. "I broke the illusion. Full-spectrum photography disrupts their ability to maintain false reflections." Dr. Thorne was already adjusting his equipment, preparing for another flash. "But it's temporary. The predator will adapt, find new ways to use the mirrors against us." Even as he spoke, the reflections began to shift again, but more subtly this time. Instead of obvious anomalies, they showed tiny discrepancies. A blink that happened a fraction of a second late, a gesture that was almost but not quite right. The changes were harder to spot, more insidious. designed to slip past conscious observation. It's learning, Dr. Thorne muttered, taking readings from his instruments, evolving its tactics in real time. This level of adaptive intelligence, I've never seen anything like it. Ethan stared at his reflections, trying to spot the inconsistencies, the tells that would reveal which images were real and which were predatory mimicry. But the differences were too subtle, too carefully grafted to fool the conscious mind while disturbing something deeper. How do we tell which reflections are real? We don't, Doctor, Thorne replied grimly. That's the point. Once you can't trust your own reflection, you can't trust your own perception, and once perception becomes unreliable, it can step fully into reality. Exactly, Doctor. Thorne began gathering his equipment. We need to fall back, regroup. This approach isn't working. But as they moved toward the door, every reflection in the room turned to watch them leave. Dozens of versions of themselves, some subtle variations, others grotesque parodies, all tracking their movement with predatory attention. And in the largest mirror, the one that had started it all, Ethan caught a glimpse of something that made his blood freeze. Lena was still there, still trapped behind the glass, still reaching out with desperate hands. But now she wasn't alone. Around her, barely visible in the reflected darkness, were other figures, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all with the same desperate expression, all reaching toward a freedom they would never achieve. All the previous victims of the perceptual Faltar, trapped forever in a prison of mirrors and observation, all waiting for someone else to join them. As they left the room of eyes behind, Ethan heard the sound of hands pressing against glass, the whisper of voices calling his name, the soft sobs of souls trapped between reflection and reality. His sanctuary had become another kind of hell, and he was beginning to suspect that might have been the plan all along.